Hello, everyone. We're going to give everyone a moment or two just to get settled, sit at your computer, make sure your volume is up for this wonderful discussion. So we're just going to settle in for a moment. So just settle in, make sure all your settings are ready to have a wonderful, frank discussion with Tom Newmaster, Mr. Reality Check. All right, so let's start. Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Casey, Editor-in-Chief of Brand Experience Packaging Magazine. And I'm glad you're here to join our frank discussion about a major goal for most brand managers today, creating truly sustainable packaging. Nearly every brand is looking to be greener, but how can you be sure that your packaging will be truly eco-friendly? Well, that's why we're talking with Mr. Reality Check, Tom Newmaster, today. For the very few people out there who don't know Tom, let me share just a few things that make Tom special. Tom is a partner at the design agency for packaging, which is changing the brand agency relationship with its new collaboration model. You might have seen Tom and his byline in BXP under his alter ego, Mr. Reality Check, as a much published voice for the industry. Tom has always been a critical thinker who looks at both sides of a story, whether the topic is recycling, plastic, the corporate competition to meet net zero carbon, or the shopping behaviors of millennial consumers. Mr. Reality Check looks first at what the trend is saying, and then at what the market is actually doing. And today, Tom has joined me for a frank discussion about sustainable package design, followed by an interactive Q&A session where he will answer your questions. So Tom, let's kick this thing off.
Thanks, Linda. That was a lot of pressure in that intro, but we'll do our best, right?
Oh, Tom, you are always soaking up so much industry knowledge. I know that people are going to walk away from this event with so much to take to their jobs and really be able to improve the brand. So don't worry about it.
Or they won't like what I say and they'll be like mad at me for the rest of the week. We'll see what happens, right?
Yeah, we'll see what happens, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Okay, so let's go with the first question. Why is there so much plastic in packaging?
Well, you know, when it comes to materials and being a packaging guy for so many years, I don't like to rely on one material for any one thing, right? Depending on the need, depending on the product, you need all kinds of materials. The problem with plastic is that it's so good at what it does, right? You know, if you think about packaging or the definition of packaging, right? It needs to contain, protect, preserve, transport, inform, and sell the product. You know, when packaging is made from plastic, you know, it does a lot of those things well. And there's not really, you know, depending on what you're trying to do or what you're trying to protect in that product, there isn't a replacement for it. You know, and then you factor in its lightweight, so it, you know, it saves in all those areas. I think it just became the go-to material because of all of its benefits. Now, I don't want to get into a big, you know, debate or argument about, you know, the carbon footprint, because then that's a whole other thing, right? And we can talk about that too. But you know, when it comes to material functionality, we have so much plastic because it does such a really good job.
Yeah, definitely. There's some jobs that plastic just it does that no other material, unfortunately, can do, and we've definitely seen that in just the recent times.
Right. Well, and even if you bring up, you know, just what happened in the last year with the whole COVID situation, you know, so many products were being delivered in plastic bottles because that was the best way to get it to consumers. So, you know, in a way, we probably consumed more plastic, you know, over the last year than we did in previous years.
Yeah, and it's definitely, we've had this opportunity to really see the benefits of this material and be able to see how it can literally save lives. And so this has been just kind of eye-opening time for our society. And as package designers, we have to recognize that and recognize that there's always, different choices with materials, and not all of those materials are easily interchangeable, which actually that brings us to another question that came up during prep. So is all this plastic, is it easy to replace? I mean, can we just swap it on out?
Well, it's funny because whenever anybody says, well, let's replace plastic, in my typical fashion, I usually answer a question with a question. I say, like, with what? Like, what are you going to replace it with? And then, then depending on who you're talking to, if it's a sustainability initiative, they say, well, they start talking about carbon footprint. And I'm like, well, if you really look at the overall carbon footprint, many times plastic still wins. Now, that's just looking at that one side of the argument, and maybe there's more of an energy impact to make plastics, but when you look at the overall carbon footprint and the fact that it can be reused, like just think about, paper packaging or even a paper bag. Yeah, you can reuse a paper bag, but for the most part, plastic bags can be reused multiple times. So if you're looking at the big picture, right, you need to factor in, I'm going to use this. Maybe this material has a smaller carbon footprint, but it's used once. Pick plastic, right? Because that's the big topic. You make it with plastic, maybe it's a bigger carbon footprint, but you use it 3 times. Well, then you got to factor that in. So now the carbon footprint's one third. So it's really, I don't know what, depending on what you're trying to do, I don't know how you can replace plastic.
And it's not always, like you said, it's not always about, choosing plastic, but just kind of like choosing the right material for whatever that job may be.
Right.
And if it's plastic, not knocking it out of the contention. Now, I know that we have actually got a lot of folks who are right on time. So we've got a lot of folks on the line right now. So I wanted to just take a moment out of the conversation to remind everyone that this is an interactive conversation. So if you have questions for Tom, if you have comments, if you think Tom and I are way off base, you can send us your questions through the webinar module. And we will be answering those questions at the end of our fireside chat. Is it a fireside chat? Computer side chat?
Sure, we could pull up a graphic of a fire if we need to, right? but then we should have a beer or something, right? If that's what we're doing here, I should have had a little notice.
Well, we'll have to remember that next time,
right?
Remember to have a cocktail at the ready. So, but to get back to that computer side chat, next question, Tom. If sustainable plastic is so green, why does it still get vilified?
Well, I'm not so sure plastic is green, right? It's kind of double-edged sword kind of thing. I mean, I know I'm just going to reference something here. I just saw a recent report that talked about, PET #1 and HDPE #2 plastics are really the only types of plastic recycled in the U.S. or recycled on a major scale, and only 29% of those PET bottles are even collected, and then only 21% of those collected bottles are actually recycled. Why? Because of contamination, right? Consumers not recycling it properly, not rinsing it out properly. So, again, we earlier talked about all the good things, plastic does, but then it comes down to, well, you're only recycling 2 types, and then you're doing a bad job of recycling those 2 types. So, there is that green aspect, right? Because it can be used multiple times, or it can be recycled. Many times it can only be recycled once or twice until it's, not able to be recycled any further, unlike something like aluminum, for example, right? Infinitely recyclable. But then you get into the whole carbon footprint of how do you get aluminum, and then you get off in the weeds very, very quick. But I don't know. When you talk about biodegradable and compostable, those phrases get thrown around a lot. But if a plastic's biodegradable, is it really breaking down to the molecular level, or is it just now, little bits of plastic that end up in a fish belly, right? If it's compostable, like really, I can put it in my compost bin, or are you talking, industrial or commercial compostability? And it's just, I don't want to, accuse people of like greenwashing, right? Air quotes, greenwashing. But when you make claims, and being a packaging guy, I'm very sensitive to those claims. Just saying biodegradable, just saying compostable, just saying recyclable probably isn't enough, right? I think you need to clarify that a little bit. But the clarification sometimes makes it not as strong of a claim. But I think we have a responsibility to kind of do that. Like when you say compostable, I still believe most people think, oh, I can, throw it out into my yard and it'll break down. And that's not the case, especially with most, plastics.
Yeah, you bring up a couple good points there, Tom. And I think it'd be good if we broke those down for the audience a little bit. So I'm wondering if we talked about that less than 30% collected and then eventually recycled, even a smaller percentage of that. I'm wondering how you feel about the recyclability process, like the process of collecting recyclables and the process of getting them to a state where they can be recycled. Do you think that although it's, manufacturing designers, we're all having the conversations about this, do you think that municipalities could play a bigger role?
Yeah, I mean, I think, that whole recycling business is way bigger than me or anything I do. But it's a messy business, and I think we do a really bad job of it. I mean, I don't think the recyclers themselves are doing poorly. There's a lot of good people out there trying to do good things, but we don't do a really, really good job. And when I say we, Americans, or maybe, humans overall, right? Um, it's just a really messy process. And then, um, the last couple years with the whole recyclables not going to China not taking them, the U.S. unloading them off into other countries. I usually go like time out. Like, why are we offloading them? Why aren't we just recycling them here? If it's really about, if you want to be green, and I hate using that phrase, but it's just easy. Um, Shipping them halfway around the world. I mean, how's that environmentally friendly? Like, just do a better job here, right? Um, but you went from like Stamford, Connecticut, for example, in 2017, they say they made $95,000 selling their recyclables, and then by 2018 they had to pay $700,000 to get them removed. So the recycling business shifted in a matter of 1 year from making money to costing, what is that, 8 times what you were making before. And there's similar stories in Bakersfield, California too. In one of the articles I read, they were earning like $65 per ton, and then in 2018 they had to pay $25 per ton to get rid of it. So it's like, if that's the way the system is, like the system's broken, right? The system's not right. And again, like I said in the beginning, I hate to vilify any material, but when you think about plastic, plastic doesn't throw itself into the ocean, right? Plastic doesn't swim out to sea and get, a plastic straw gets stuck in a turtle's nose. I've used that phrase many, many times, but someone put it there. So it's not the plastic's problem. It's a people problem, which is so big, right? That's such a big thing.
Yeah, it's such a big thing, but I guess maybe it's a little ray of sunshine for the folks who are on this webinar today. because we have a communication vehicle to thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes millions of people. It's the package. So we have an
Right.
opportunity to educate them on PAC.
Yeah, yeah, it's true, and I think it's being honest about the communication that I mentioned earlier. Again, I see these claims all the time: biodegradable, compostable, whatever, green plastic, or whatever the latest phrase is. Even like ocean bound plastic. Again, I'm not criticizing any of these certifications, but I've asked a lot of people, like, when you see ocean bound plastic, what do you think? I'm like, oh well, that's plastic that this is a container or a product made from the plastic they got in the ocean. I'm like, no, it's ocean bound plastic. And then when you explain what that really means, it's still a good thing. And I
Hmm.
don't think it's purposely misleading, but people sometimes read and see what they want to see in those claims,
Yeah.
and and again, it's just, I think it's education and understanding those things. And again, biodegradable, what does that really mean? Compostable, what does that really mean?
Yeah, definitely. If we don't define those definitions, we don't make sure that everyone on our teams, definitely the team, the brand managers, the VPs of marketing, the CMOs that are on this call today, if they aren't making sure that their team knows what those terms mean, how are they going to be able to communicate that to the end consumer? We've got to make sure that everyone on our teams and our marketing teams and our branding teams know what these terms are.
Well, and I think there's a lot of pressure on brands and consumer products companies to be making some kind of claim, or there's a corporate initiative, right, to to move that needle because of public opinion, and that sounds shallow too. I mean, you should be doing it because it's the right thing to do, but I think sometimes it's and I've had some clients say this, like, let's just do something, like we got to say something, and I have this one client now that, they kind of bring this stuff up every now and then,
Hmm.
but I'll say, your cardboard boxes are recyclable and you don't even say recyclable on them. What I mean? Like, there's some obvious things, if you really want to do something, then why don't you just remind people? And then I believe there's also some of those out there to say, well, everyone knows that cardboard box is recyclable, but okay, probably, but if you don't remind them, right, it's not telling them it's recyclable, it's reminding them that they should recycle it, right?
Yeah, it's that little nudge to
Yeah.
do the right behavior. And that's a great example, Tom. I know that we've been talking a lot about plastic, but talking about paperboard boxes, because I know that um, in a lot of the conversations that we've had, uh, just conversations that haven't been on camera or for a story, just conversations, that we've talked about how the fiber for paperboard is in such high demand that paperboard manufacturers, people who make shippers, people who make boxes, they want recyclable material, and
Mhm.
especially since they're not getting as much office paper from commercial buildings, that they need that raw material in order
Right,
to make.
just to kind of mix in with that new virgin fiber that gives strength to that cardboard box. Yeah, I mean, I know, we had been working on a pizza box concept over the last couple years, and I know some of the larger corrugated suppliers, they're really trying to figure out a way to get their hands on recycled pizza boxes. But the problem is pizza boxes are usually contaminated, right? There's some kind of grease, depending on the recycling process, that grease turns that recycled bin into sludge. So how do you make a pizza box circular? Like, how do you make it that it can come back around and be used again, as opposed to trash? And I know a lot of people just recycle their pizza boxes, and my local recycling center here, they pull all pizza boxes out and throw them away, because
Oh my gosh,
yeah,
yeah.
so because they can't take the risk of wasting or ruining a whole batch of of paper pulp because too many pizza boxes with grease got in there and ruined it. So they're sacrificing all of them to potentially save that. So yeah, and I don't think a lot of people even know that. You know.
Yeah, I think that might be an education opportunity for the recycling centers. We should maybe for a future episode, a future event, we should maybe bring the Fiberbox Association in there because I do believe those recyclers can use the contamination levels for recycled paperboard are not what they used to be. And so
Right.
you can use a contaminated pizza box, but as you say, the employees don't know that. If the employees at the recyclers don't know that, it doesn't really matter because the employees aren't pulling that recycled material.
Yeah, no, I mean, seriously, I have photos of it. At our local recycling center, they have signs on their, containers for corrugated, like no pizza boxes, handmade signs
Mhm.
taped all over it. The rule of thumb I was always given, and this might be a little old now because the recycling's gotten better, was, if it's larger than a quarter or $half size um, grease spot, you shouldn't recycle that box. Um, I'm like, well, then just cut it out. Like, right, you could just tear that part off. So many times, and maybe it's just
Yep.
convenience and people being lazy, right? If I
Yeah.
can't recycle this box, I'm just throwing it away. Well, you can just
Hmm.
that's me. That's me. I like stacking up cardboard and recycling it. I don't know if it's because, again, being in packaging all these years, I don't mind cutting up boxes. It's almost therapy, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's you kind of, you get that for you feel like you've done something virtuous, when you're doing that. You know that you're doing something that's right. I would love if anyone in the audience is in the paperboard business and knows a little bit about this. I put your comments, put your questions in that question panel because we would love to bring you into that conversation and just kind of hear, hear from everyone. Because again, this is an interactive conversation. We want to hear from all of you. And we definitely want to have a frank discussion. I mean, that's why Tom's alter ego is Mr. Reality Check, because he wants to have those real conversations. He doesn't want to just have the conversation of what we believe things are and what our research has shown us. We want to have that conversation with the industry. We want to have the conversation with all the industries about what's going on. What do you see? What's your experience? And take things, out of just theory into reality. So please comment, send your questions if you have any insight into this area. Okay, so Tom, we've talked a lot about, plastic. We've talked a little bit about paper. Maybe we'll go back to plastic. Let's go back to plastic for a little bit so that we don't we had so many great conversations about plastic, the two of us. I know that we have lots of opinions here. And so let's go back to plastic and let's talk about that marketing communications to consumers. We talked about the education part of it and what we need to do to educate the consumer. But we haven't talked about just pure marketing. Why does sustainable plastic appeal so much to consumers?
I think it's because people deep down inside want to do something, right? And so many things come in plastic. So if it's just as simple as making them feel good about their purchases, because there's many products, I don't know what you would replace that plastic bottle with. Like you just don't go back to glass for everything, right? Because then you get into, again, what's the
Mm-hmm.
carbon footprint of making glass. But I always think about the medical industry when you talk about plastic. It was revolutionized by plastic. In a recent, not me personally, visit to the hospital, but an experience in a hospital setting, it was mind-boggling to me how many one-time use plastic things are in a hospital setting, which is all good. Again, I'm not knocking it, and I don't think we should get back to trying to, like, sterilize everything the way it used to be done. But you know, it's just plastic does such a really good job, and I just, you know, there's just some products I don't know how they can get out of plastic, because I don't see any new material on the horizon that's going to replace all of the functionality of that plastic.
Hmm. And it's interesting that you mentioned the, medical field. I agree with you. You know, when you have time, time is of the essence, and you need to, and actual making sure someone doesn't get a horrible hospital acquired infection of some sort. Like we've both had experiences with infections in the hospitals and things like that. You don't want to have that happen. So you have to be able to have an option for the medical field, um, that this kind of option needs to exist. And so the medical field chooses to use plastic,
Right.
and the most sustainable plastic they can, but they choose
Right.
plastic. So is sustainable plastic an important part of the purchasing decision? Do you think that consumers, I know that you really follow what millennials are buying and what they're interested in. Do you find that, that consumers are really looking for sustainable plastic packaging when they're buying their products?
Well, yeah, and you know, depending on the study or the research format used to get data, you know, they round numbers. They say, you know, 65% of consumers say they want to buy brands that advocate sustainability, whether it's corporate wide or just, you know, sustainability within that packaging or product. Unfortunately, and this is kind of the reality check part of it, and maybe this is more reflective of, you know, American consumers, but only 26% actually do so. So people say they want, you know, sustainability or advocate for sustainability, but then in the end, you know, 65% want it, 26% do it. So again, I go back to the bottle doesn't walk up to the ocean and jump in, right? It comes back to a people problem. And listen, I love convenience products, right? I'm not one to, you know, bash anybody for any of that stuff, but you know, again, I think until it becomes more convenient and easier to do, and maybe there's an education and understanding part, I I think consumers are going, it's still going to be that I want to do it, but then I don't do it, or I can't do it, or it's not as easy to do. And then, and even in the college setting, because I've been teaching packaging design for, I guess it's over 10 years now. You know, I usually ask students, right? Like, hey, does sustainability, does recycling mean something to you? And over time, it's become more and more, you know, the class overall says it's important to them. Um, but then in the way I do, you're right, observing everything, I watch them just throw their plastic soda bottles in the trash when they walk out of the classroom. So it's like when they see these numbers 65, 26, and then in the classroom again, it's a small, you know, microcosm of that generation or even, you know, regional location, that it's like, oh, okay, so those numbers are right because, you know, they just told me it matters to them, and then they didn't take the extra millisecond to put it in the right bin, you know. And in this case, my example is the recycle bins next to the trash, and it was just,
Hmm.
they just put it in the wrong, I mean, and it's like, okay, you know, I don't know how you can
Hmm.
make it easier than that, but then I can get into that um at at my own home, right? If my kids were on here now, they'd be like, I can't believe dad's going to talk about this. But it's like it it was more inconvenient to throw that plastic bottle in the trash than it was to throw it in the recycling bin. Like come on, guys. And then I tell them, like, listen, I'm in packaging. I have to set an example, and you guys got to help, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And this leads to us to a great question that came in. So we're getting questions that
Oh,
are
that's good.
really,
At least we know someone's there, right?
oh my gosh, yeah. I see a lot of, looking up at our panels. I see a lot of folks are here and a lot of folks are engaged.
Good.
So I know that we have, our questions that we wanted to get to, but I want to make sure we have time with
Okay.
all to hit
Sure.
some of those key questions. So let's break for that a little bit. So our first question comes from Kirsten, and it is so Kristen asked a question that's perfect for the conversation we're having right now. What can we do to get a plastic recycling system that actually works?
You know, that is a great question because I've been talking about that for a long time. And listen, I don't want to get into politics, right? I don't want to get into like big government, small government, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, whatever. But like, if you were gonna subsidize something, why wouldn't it be recycling? Like, I can't, you know, unless you're just opposed to government helping anything, right? I don't think anybody's really in that camp, really. Um, why wouldn't why, why wouldn't we help that system work better? Like, because if
Mhm.
you make it easier, convenient, and you can harvest those materials, right? It's almost like mining the materials and make it available. It becomes, you know, readily available. And if it's readily like harvested in every county, that's even greener, right? Because it's going to be closer to, you know, wherever those products would actually be needed. But it's just everything's moved around so much. And I know we have a global economy, but the fact that we're collecting recyclables and up until recently we're sending them to China, that just that, I mean, part of me, like the reality check part of me is like, wouldn't it be greener to just incinerate them, right? Like
Mhm.
eliminate all of that transportation and whatever happened to it. Um, I just think something big has got to happen to make recycling, or somebody's going to figure out um, some system, and I know they already have them, like computer generated AI sorting systems. Um, as soon as somebody can figure out how to make serious money at doing it, it'll happen.
Yeah, yeah,
It's always
definitely.
follow the money, right? Everyone hates to hear that, but it's true. Like, if somebody can figure out how to make money recycling, like make real money recycling, it'll happen.
Yeah, we definitely will have to follow like the AI developments on that and see how things are going to be
Yeah,
going with it.
some of those
Mhm.
sorters are just amazing to watch. If you've ever watched any videos of how it like uses air and water to separate, it's amazing.
We have one of those AI robots, like huge, like block-sized robots, just a couple towns from where I live in Somerville, and it is absolutely amazing. It's just like they're so high tech. They're able to sort everything, clean it, and make sure everything is able to be recovered. It's a great thing. And like you said, if we could harvest this, I always think about petroleum. You know, petroleum is used to make plastic. If we can recover
Yeah.
that plastic, we don't have to find that oil.
Well,
So
and I
that's
guess, you know,
yes.
depending on who you talk to, they actually view plastic as petroleum because it's either made from oil or natural gas. So it really is
Yeah.
ultimately all petroleum, right? So how do you get it back? And I believe that, and I might be wrong, but I believe that's why it can be used as a fuel when you're, you know, incinerating it, because it really
Mhm.
is, you know, based on that raw material. And again, I don't, you know, I'm not a recycling expert, you know, but how much research and funding is going into figuring out ways to, you know, break down the plastic better. You know, are there ways? You know,
Mhm.
it's a hard enough
Yeah.
time just keeping up with the package design stuff if I had to try and figure out, right? And it's easier for me to sit here and like, listen, I need to design packaging. I need to do this packaging thing. Somebody else needs to figure out how to recycle it. Well, that's not fair either. But you know, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah. And that's why we're having this conversation today, right? So that we can all kind of put our collective imaginations together and be able to figure out what is a better way of doing this and be able to move everything forward. Because I think most consumer facing brands, I think most people want to do the right thing. Now, whether that translates into real behaviors, it's another question. But intentions, I think are definitely there. Oh my gosh, we have more questions coming in. Okay, so Tom, let me read this next one and pull it up. Okay, So we have Greg agreeing with you. Recycling plastics needs to be federally subsidized to produce profitably. Cheapest wins most every time. So I wanted to share that you have a like-minded person on the call. And then we have a question from Jeremy. With eco-friendly packaging material options that are out there, they are so cost prohibitive. So we are talking a lot about money here. How long until costs simply come down so they are viable options for us to make better choices when developing consumer product packaging? Wow, deep question, Jeremy. Huh?
I think it's as simple as supply and demand. I think as more and more consumers demand it, or their behaviors match their wanting to recycle, like once you get, I used that number before, 65% of consumers say they, advocate or want to buy brands that advocate sustainability, but then only 26% actually do so. I think once those numbers get closer together, right, I believe like once there's a bigger demand for those sustainable packages, and that demand is definitely going up. But I think until those numbers collide, like until you have more than half of the people, like, I don't want to say demanding it, but saying they want it and then actually buying based on that, like, again, follow the money. Once they start buying, like, religiously based on that, you know, somebody will figure it out and those costs will come down, just because you'll need to make more. You'll need to figure out a way to make it better, make it, make more of it, make it faster. It'll just naturally happen. I would think so.
Yeah, and so everyone on the call, this is our opportunity. Tom's given the call to action. All of us, we need to create that demand, so we create the market conditions that are going to change the way that recyclable materials are collected, and how many of them actually go back into that recycling loop.
Well, and I think, if you think about, I don't want to say, Linda, that we are old enough to remember, because that sounds terrible to say, right? But there, a lot of things used to be in glass, and then plastic was the savior of the industry, right? It was lightweight. I mean, it was almost like sustainability and environmentalism before it was cool, kind of thing. It was like they were saying, like, environmental things. It's lighter, it's cheaper, it protects products better, it lasts longer, it's reusable. But then we kind of solved the problem and created another problem. Now we have all this one-time use trash versus, glass was being reused. I mean, we used to collect. Now this is before my time too, but we used to collect milk bottles, right? We used to reuse, like, the whole and again, it was a different time, a different place.
It's before our time with the milk bottles, but I know that both of us we're able to remember the time with our Coke bottles when we had our soda bottles.
Correct.
That we recycled those glass soda bottles. Everyone did it.
And have you seen those machines that this great videos, like, they actually recycle the glass bottles right there in front of you, like turn it back into sand?
No.
Yeah, you can literally put your bottle in, and the machine basically grinds it back down into, I guess, what would it be, like little silica pellets or whatever the right term is. It's just super cool to watch. But that kind of thing, because then it actually happened, right? The bottle actually got recycled. I mean, I just thought that was an interesting way to get people to recycle glass, because it happens right in front of you.
Yeah, I love that, because I love the whole idea of, obviously, I love anything that elevates the brand experience. I mean, it's literally in the title of our magazine.
Right.
But taking the whole idea of this packaging need, and making it part of the brand experience in order to give something positive to the consumers is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Okay, and speaking of brilliant, the questions keep coming in. So, all right. with so much negativity in the consumer mindset around the word plastic, should a packaging company with that word in their name take it out? So Brooke is asking, are they risking loss of business just because of the word, or should they make sustainability a core part of their brand?
Well, I mean, if you're going to make sustainability a core part of your brand and change the name of your company, you better be serious about it, and it better be real. Like, it shouldn't just be a greenwashing, kind of move. Me as, and again, this goes back to being a package designer. I mean, plastic in your name. If I need a company that makes plastic, I mean, that's just right. That's like branding 101, right? If that's what you do, plastic should be in your name. Um, yeah, I go back to, I don't want to vilify any single material. So I don't, plastic in your company name, is that bad? I mean, unless the whole company direction is gonna change. I don't know if just following that. I think it's maybe managing the expectations of that name and make sure you're presenting it in a proper way. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's just crazy to think about. I mean, I'm not saying the question's crazy or the person asking the question is crazy, right? But the fact that plastics in your name, and that's been vilified to the point where you're thinking about changing the name of your company, is that's kind of scary too, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. You still have to have your core, proposition to, what are you offering, as a brand to your
Right.
customers, and you can't take that away to have a brand message is that is just popular, because you don't want to do that. But hopefully you're doing everything else within your brand to make it as eco-friendly and sustainable as it can be. And you're getting a kudos. So high five from Shelly. She is saying, so glad to hear what I found out today. So I'm adding the today. So what I found out, and communicate it to our groups. So
Oh, good.
we, good job. Good job.
So then I'll get nasty emails from somebody at some point, right? Because
Well, we have to be,
take
whenever
the
you
good
have a
with the
frank
bad.
conversation, you're gonna have
Right.
people who love it and some people who hate it. And well, that's part of what we're having, interactive conversation, to make sure that everybody can, if we're off base, go ahead, send us the comment and
Right.
ask us a question, set us right. So we want to keep it real.
Yeah. Me and Linda, we'll defend ourselves if we have to, right?
Yeah, or maybe we'll have our
Or
minds
not.
change.
Right. It's true.
Yeah, so it could be a good thing.
I just
Oh
think it's easy to kind of jump on the
my God.
bandwagon of attacking plastics. And I'm not being paid to defend plastics, and I have no real skin in the game to kind of defend plastics. It's just I don't think it's fair, because there's so many times I don't know what else you would put it in, you know?
Mhm.
Like, I don't have an option.
Well, and then I think of, what was the article that we were talking about? Was it a Cosmo article where they said that they were no longer, the op-ed, where they were no longer going to um, say any product was sustainable if it was in plastic packaging. And that blows my mind. And like, but
Right.
there are some cases where it's lightweight, it provides product protection, because we've had EPA experts on BXP events say that food waste was by far, you
Yep.
know, food waste, any kind of product waste, damaged product waste is a bigger problem in landfills than spent packaging.
Yeah.
And if that is still the case, we don't have an EPA person on board now. If they're in the audience, please hop on to the comments and let us know
If
if
you're
it's
gonna
still
take
the number
right,
one.
so okay, now I'm gonna ruffle some feathers probably, but if you're gonna say no, like no plastic, well then you're gonna get rid of your car, right? Because a lot of your car is plastic. And why is it plastic? Well, because it's the best material and it made your car lighter, so it made it more fuel efficient. So, you know, there's a your car's more fuel efficient because of plastic. So you're going to get rid of your car. I'm curious to see what kind of shoes you wear, unless you're just wearing sandals, right? And then don't tell me you're going to take public transportation, because if you're taking a subway or a train or a bus, there's no plastic in there. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it does. You can't just demonize it and draw that line. I mean, you can definitely draw that line in the sand, but then it's almost hypocritical, right? Because I guess you don't have a cell phone either, right? There's no plastic in that. Like, how do you can't just vilify it and draw that hard of a line when good or bad, plastic's a part of our life, and the good side is it's done a lot of good, right? The bad thing is we don't know what to do with it then,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a good side. It's done a lot of good, but we need to figure out that kind of end of life scenario. And Heidi comes in with a comment. So we've, invited everyone, interactive discussion. So we invited everyone to have comments as well as questions through our question panel. And she makes a really good point. So I'm going to read that off. And so it's like, for that reason, paper is a good choice for shipping containers, but not perhaps for holding some consumer products. So she's saying, like, sometimes in primary packaging, it's not a really great option. And the reason is because they have to be coated to make them robust enough, safe enough to hold that product and protect it. So even when we try to get away from plastic, are we really getting away from plastic? Are we getting, is that paper bottle really a paper bottle, or is it a plastic bottle in disguise?
Right. And I've seen materials that are great materials, right? Lightweight, do a lot of functional things. You can fold them, mold them, shape them, whatever it might be, and then it's presented as an alternative to plastic. But the problem is now it's 3, 4 layers of material and product, and you can't separate them. So it does a lot of good, but then it's end of life, because you can't recycle that. You can't separate those layers. So now you created a different problem. Whereas if you just kept it in, I don't know, making this up, a PET bottle, like, I know what this is, I can recycle this like this, you know, cleaner single material packaging seems better to me. Like if somebody could figure out how to make a trigger bottle, right, for a home cleaning product where everything about that product was made from PET, like the whole trigger assembly, everything, that you knew you could just recycle that whole thing as PET. But the problem is you can't. You have to separate the bottle from the trigger, and the trigger has 2 or 3 different kinds of plastics and a metal spring. And um, I mean, to me, single material, I think if you could make that easier for the consumer, you might get more consumers to actually do it. We've had a couple projects like that with, especially when it comes to e-commerce, right? Trying to do single material ships in boxes, whereas before they might have been taking 2 products, putting them in I'm making this up, like a plastic bag, then get stuck in a bubble mailer and sent to the consumer. If we can just put that in a cardboard box without any bubble pack, use corrugated to make those spacers and that type of thing, that when the consumer gets the product, there's no other bags and stuff to get rid of, right? There's just cardboard. I mean, to me, that makes a lot more sense, because you're you're more than likely to get the consumer to do it if it's easy. Like, I think our biggest challenge is how easy can we make it, right, for the consumer to make that recycling effort. If you can get it down to one material and tell them or advise them or guide them to do one thing, it's better than some trash, some gets recycled this way, some gets recycled that way, or at least that's how it feels to me.
Yeah, definitely. You see, you got these inserts that can really kind of even take a shipping box and make it into a mono material. Definitely with a pump, being able to, that's something that's hard to pull apart. Your consumer can't
No.
easily pull that apart. So that has to be landfilled. The cost of pulling it apart would just not make business sense. So we know that those are going to be headed for landfills. So if we can kind of be able to design things that are more monomaterial, we could help the industry achieve its recycling goals. Greg, though, in the audience, he has a question about that. He is, specifically about dunnage, the stuff that is in the shipping boxes to protect those products. And he's asking, are expanded foams really as sustainable ugly as the states that are trying to ban them say they are? So, what's your opinion, and do you try to stay away from specifying sustainable?
You know, I, foams are kind of an interesting thing. I don't have a whole lot of experience with them. We had a couple projects, in my career. One recently. Now, it wasn't expandable foam, but it was just some foam inserts. I mean, I started out the project trying not to use a foam because no one, even if it is recyclable, people don't know how to recycle it, right? Like, where does this go? How do you tell me what it is? I tried to get away from using it, making the whole box and its insert and all its protective components out of corrugated or some kind of paperboard, and we just couldn't do it because in the end the product had to be in a glass bottle. It couldn't be in plastic. It could be in aluminum, but it was preferred to be in glass. We just had to protect that bottle, right? Because in the end is a greater environmental impact of
Mhm,
all that product breaking and being thrown away, um, versus protecting it, what packaging is supposed to do. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot more to learn, a lot more education to when it comes to
mhm,
like foam type things. And and here in the US, when it comes to recycling, if it's not number one, number two, or cardboard, like,
mhm,
yes, glass, aluminum, and tin
mhm.
cans, so to speak, right? If we still say that. Um, I mean, if you get out of the realm of five or six materials, it becomes a problem here. Unlike Japan, they have a crazy. Is it 13 materials that they recycle readily? It's like it you know,
Yeah, it's so much recycling in Asia, and it's expected. It's culturally kind of
yeah,
expected to be that way, which is amazing when you think about the footprint in the individual homes. Some of the homes are tight in the cities, and the consumers are making a effort to recycle all those um, spent packages, which
I,
is
I
fabulous.
I remember years ago. I can't remember which country it was in Europe. I want to say like Norway or Sweden. But there was a
Mhm.
specific package design we had to do for that country, and we had to completely change the packaging because it had to be able to be recycled at retail. Like the consumer would buy it. It was actually dental floss. The consumer had to be able to buy it, and then separate like the blister that held it and the cardboard at the store and recycle it before they left the store. And I thought that was interesting. And that was years ago. And I don't know if that's still
Wow.
the way it is. Yeah, it had to totally change.
Yeah, I couldn't see that happening in the States. At
No way.
least in my friends and family, they probably just give up the flossing.
Right. Right. Exactly. Wait, I have to do what? Well, forget it. I'm not doing that. Right.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, but kudos for them. Definitely kudos for them. We have a comment from Tina. So Tina wants to weigh in and kind of educate us in the audience and just kind of have that conversation about, is it paper always the right answer? And she says, paper is treated with fixatives, bleaches, all sorts of chemicals.
Yeah.
Um, and much of this is terrible for the soil. So she just wanted to make sure that we knew that and our audience knows that it's not just because it looks green, it doesn't mean it's the wrong material, but it doesn't mean it's the right material.
Right. And I think that's why when companies or consumer products companies really do their research, and whether it's carbon footprint or energy or recyclability or a combination of all of those things, when you really look at real numbers and multiple use, it's hard to beat plastic because of those very things. Like when you say, oh, I'm going to replace it with paperboard, but when you really look at it, what are you trading off? Paper bag's twice as heavy as a plastic bag. So is that okay? Like, what's that long term impact? And like you mentioned, the bleaches and or the processing needed to convert paper pulp. When you
Yeah.
really get down to the dirty little secrets, unfortunately, and again, I get paid nothing to defend plastic, but when you really get down into it and you look at all the information, everything you learn, plastic looks better. But that doesn't change the end, right? It doesn't get recycled the way it should. So it's not, it's not the ultimate answer, but it's really hard to beat it when you really look at the numbers.
And it's like, yeah, this is a great point. So Tina, kudos to you, because thank you for, sharing that fact and making sure that we stopped and talked with the audience about, the importance of a material that sometimes is often seen as just kind of the be it end all of sustainable packaging. So, oh my gosh, Tom, we might have to go over the hour if you have a little bit of time, because we've got so many questions we have to go through.
Sure.
So, all right. So let's go to, Dan. Dan has a long question, so let's read it, and hopefully it's amazing because it's long. It should be thoughtful.
I'm going to get my pen in case I have to take notes.
You might need it. Okay, so it looks like it's like 4 sentences long. So on the fiber side, moving beyond the fiber box, brands are showing a real interest in pulp-based packaging. Forming bottle shapes with pulp is achievable today, giving the barrier of plastic is the next hurdle. The design and details can be impressive. So I guess let's rephrase this. So Dan is saying basically molded fiber, molded pulp, packaging, primary packaging is pretty amazing as far as shape. They've really gone to the next level. But the problem is you still need a barrier. So it might be a lighter weight, bit of plastic than you would have on a standalone plastic bottle, but you still have to have the plastic in there. What is your opinion about, the barrier of plastic and the next steps? And maybe since we're talking package design, how to communicate? I'm going to add, how do we communicate that there's plastic in there and it's okay?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I've seen some, beautiful things, right? And sometimes those pulp formed shapes, bottles, they just feel really good, right? A good feel in your hand. But again, I've also seen videos and people complaining on social media like, well, then when I got this home, I opened it up and there's just a plastic bottle inside, right? I think that's like the deception part. They think, oh, it's a wood pulp bottle. But I think, I think the goal is if the company's goal or their sustainability goals are to reduce plastic, right? Use less packaging or use less plastic packaging. It's a good way to kind of achieve that goal. But then I kind of, that whole like reality check thing. Well, what's the impact of that paper pulp? Like, is producing that an environmental issue? I mean, and again, I don't want to bash that material either, but I think you have to look and make sure you don't mislead consumers, because I think there's a lot of that going on, whether it's intentional or not. But to just say you have a paper pulp bottle, that isn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's our goal is to reduce our dependency on plastic, so we've developed this paper pulp bottle. Basically it's giving strength to that thinner plastic bottle. I mean, all that stuff is good, and if it gets recycled even more often, that's even better, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And it goes back to what you said early in this event. You said, when we were talking about, should you take plastic out of the name of a company? It's like, is the problem really the fact that the paper bottle has a plastic barrier, or is the problem that with consumers and the perception of paper bottles is that we should just say and let them know, like you just said, that it's a much thinner plastic bottle that's made possible because there's molded fiber involved.
Well, I think explaining in a very simple way. And this is hard to do on packaging, right? A lot of my clients, they they want to say too much, and I'm like, if you say too much, you're going to say nothing. And you know, come back to me when you got it down to 3 bullet points that aren't sentences. Um, you can't. I think it's managing and maintaining those expectations, which is kind of like what I do in business, right? You just gotta like manage the expectations. Like, we're not replacing plastic. We're just trying to be more responsible users of plastic. Again, that's easy for us to sit here and talk about and say, um, versus trying to communicate on a 3 by 5 inch package on a shelf with 200 other products. But I just think there's got to be. I think you got to just manage those expectations the whole way through, and not, you know, again, that whole term greenwashing. Like, just don't greenwash it and make it sound like you're getting rid of the plastic bottle when you really didn't. You know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this might be an opportunity. Remember when we were talking about like smart and active packaging and how you could continue that brand conversation with the packaging through that connected pack. I'm wondering if that goes back to, this goes back to that conversation that we had, I think it was 2 years ago that we had the conversation about smart and active packaging.
Yeah. Well, and I think, just again, picking on that whole, paper pulp molded bottle thing, now instead of a single material recycle situation, it's two. So you solved one problem, but now you kind of created another one, especially for, American consumers. So, if that's the road you want to go, that's cool, right? And then it becomes a great story, right? It becomes a great brand story, you know. But you need to communicate that. So how do you communicate it? And make it as easy and as simple for the consumer to buy into that story, and then in this case recycle it efficiently and effectively.
Yeah, definitely. So we are quite a bit over right now. So maybe we'll just try to see if we can do 1 or 2 questions, because I know that a lot of folks were planning to have an hour event, and this has been so great. We could probably go all day. I mean, that's how many questions are coming in. It's a lot of questions.
Well, at least we could talk to each other all day. Whether everyone else would find it interesting or not, we don't know for sure.
The audience participation does not lie. So
Okay,
like, people are engaged, they care about this topic, and they want to do the right thing, and it's obvious by the audience participation today.
Well, then we'll have to do a sequel, right? A part 2.
Oh, definitely, we should do a part 2. We'll
Speaking
talk
of
about
sequels, I have sequel posters behind me here. Just get into that right away, right?
Yeah, it'll be the Mr. Reality Check series. So
There you
that would
go.
be a good thing.
All right.
So going back to the questions, Robert says, do you feel that retailer initiatives to be plastic free by 2025 will actually be helpful in allied to society?
Plastic free 2025 is impossible. Like, right? Like, I really don't see, unless you make it illegal with prison time associated with it. Like, I don't think that's possible. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not opposed to lofty goals, but you got to set achievable goals, right? That sounds better if it would be plastic reduction of 25%, right? Because I just an overall elimination of any material is, I just don't think it's doable. And I think it creates another problem, because then people knee jerk react to a solution. And as humans, we solve problems by creating other problems. Right? It's just kind of how we do. We're really good at solving problems, but we're also really good at creating other problems. That just seems fast to me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think this will have to be our last question, because we're running so much over. So last question will be from a Brooke, and so she asks, with costs rising as a result of inflation and supply chain slowdowns, doesn't that make the argument in favor of plastic for the near future?
I mean, I tell you, we basically had a plastic shortage over the last year. I mean, I I had several projects over the whole you know COVID timeframe that was just changing labeling because they couldn't get their old bottle and they had to go into this new bottle, and the label didn't fit. It was all about delivering product to the consumer, um, and you just couldn't get plastic. It was partially shutdowns, whether it be in China or here in the U.S. It was just supply and demand needing bottles that were allocated for, I don't know, car care products were now being shifted to make hand sanitizer and disinfectant. So, we consumed a lot of plastic over the last, year or so. So yeah, and when it comes down to, cost, right? And getting cost out, as if you see some inflation in certain products, lighter, easy to manufacture materials are going to rise to the top. We may not like it, but I think we're going to use more plastic before we use less, right? No, nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to talk about that, but it's going to be really hard to use less plastic in the coming years without some other dramatic, innovation, material innovation, or ability to recycle better.
Yeah, and that's why having conversations like today's conversation is so important. And it's great that we're having this kind of frank discussion with the industry, and we're having it as an interactive discussion, so that we're all trying to figure out how to solve this huge challenge that is here today and going to be bigger for tomorrow. So
yeah, it isn't. There isn't just one answer, right? It's a series of answers and a layering of solutions.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So want to thank everyone here. Everyone, I want to thank you, Tom, but I also want to thank our audience. Yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you for joining us and being part of this conversation and being frank and
great.
Yeah, and I know I've learned a lot today. So I definitely learned things that I didn't know at the beginning of this event, and I hope that it helps our audience create more eco-friendly, sustainable packaging. Tom, I know that you want to help continue this conversation, help brand managers, help brand leaders on their journey to be more sustainable. So I'm going to invite everybody, grab your pencil, your stylus, your device. Just grab some type of recording material, because we are going to put up a slide with Tom's contact information. He has invited you to come out and reach him. And so when you get that slide, please make sure to write down the information. And that slide is going to end our event. So we want to thank you for your time and wish you a wonderful, wonderful day.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you, Tom.